Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 153 of Russian invasion of Ukraine. This is the first week of February 2025. In today's podcast, let's talk about the latest developments between Russia and the United States and how Putin changes his strategy and tries to become a good buddies with Trump. So Washington and Moscow started communicating regarding the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump's special representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, will soon be coming to Kiev. Will he already have a plan in place? Or will he want to see the Ukrainian plan, get information to work out a negotiating position? All three of those points will be considered. Why? Because, judging by everything, the Americans do not yet have a solid, meaningful plan of action, at least from what we see. To a certain extent, this is good, because it helps us promote our ideas for this plan to end the war in Ukraine. This is a chance to convey our logic and convince that this logic meets not only Ukrainian but also American interests. However, the conversation has to start somewhere. He will listen to the officials, civil society, and Ukrainian media, which are the fourth estate. Then, saturated with everything he hears, I think Kellogg will better navigate our and, in fact, his priorities. This that we and American are standing on one side of the barricades. And I think that if we convey to the new American administration that any concessions to the enemy are a strategic defeat, then this would already be our victory to some extent. So the question is what Washington and Moscow are currently discussing. I remain a supporter of the thesis that Putin has no tools left to influence Trump, except for blackmail. But now we see from Russian propaganda that in fact they have turned the tables, and instead of saying that Trump is a last bastard and so on, they are already spinning a completely different story that Trump is hardly an ally, a partner with whom the fate of the world should be decided. And if you look at Russia's through Trump's eyes, there is very little value in there. Russia has become an economic slave of China. Russia, as an economic unit, has already disappeared from the map into who knows what dozen countries in the world. So this partner can only give Trump's negative moments because everyone in the civilized world understands that Putin is a war criminal, and to make serious deals with this war criminal is in fact to harm his own image and nothing else. Yes, Trump wants to and has the logic to conclude quick deals, but here we must stop in time and understand that speed doesn't always mean quality. And if he wants to lead this line that America should become strong, then this America should think strategically and not grab onto some small logical deals that will supposedly add up to a big one. Trump has now backed down from his attacks on both Canada and Panama. He promises to take revenge on Europe, but the European states also show their teeth. The same with Russia. But we don't know what Trump has proposed, whether in elements or in some such large programs of measures to the Russian Federation. There is a lot of speculation on this topic now. From what one can imagine, this doesn't yet cause satisfaction among the Russian elite. Same time, the Russian elite understands that they cannot piss off Trump and they have no choice but to find a way to build good relationships with the new US president, or the consequences will be devastating. And what we started seeing lately, exactly, we're seeing that the Russian Russians started showing willingness to communicate, work with the White House on resolving this ridiculous war that Moscow had no choice but to start in order to defend its national interests. Basically, the time to kiss Trump's ass has arrived. I have already come across several videos in which Russian propagandists or Z channels say that peace is good and war is terrible. And in general, it's time to end the war because the greatest emperor Vladimir Putin has achieved everything he wanted, and those who say that he didn't achieve it, they work for Ukrainians and are generally enemies of Russia. In general, I have even heard that they say that you need to cut off the tongue of all those who advocate the continuation of the war, that peace is better. And if you want to fight, then take the rifle or go to the front yourself. Fight there and go on offensive, which means die. And the top Russian propagandists say that if Vladimir Putin says that he have won, that all the goals of the special operations have been achieved, and that the Russian people have turned out to be the most powerful nation on earth. So then it is so, and you should believe it. Otherwise, if you say something against it, you will end up in jail. Well, in general, now in Russia, there has been a rather serious attack on those who publicly declare without ceasing that the war must go on forever. That is necessary to capture not only Kiev and Lviv but also Warsaw, London, and other cities of the West. There are quite a few such speakers and propagandists in Russia. Their point of view was respected until recently. They simply didn't leave the TV airwaves and talk about how, for example, it's necessary to pulverize American military bases somewhere in the Greenland or destroy the Norfolk Naval Base on the east coast of the United States in Sutter. For them, talk about the nuclear strikes that must be carried out has become commonplace. The rest of the war strong supporters in Russia are now ordered to bite their tongues, and those who voluntarily refuse to do so will have their tongues bitten on purpose, and perhaps not only tongues. It's time to shut up, because the strategy is changing. By the way, it must be said that again, these Russian Z military leaders, who previously reacted very painfully to any speeches about ending the war, wrote huge sheets about the fact that anyone who offers to make peace or anyone who offers some kind of negotiations with the West is a traitor. Now, they don't write like that, at least on social media. Where people write on their own behalf, there is no such thing. They are afraid. That is, they were probably given the order to keep it quiet and stop promoting the war. And everyone was told to forget about the capture of London, Paris, and especially Washington. Now, this is not what is needed from the Kremlin's point of view. On the contrary, the team is starting to carefully campaign not for the war and victory, but for peace. So Putin now aims to build good relationships with Donald Trump as he understands good relationships in his world, in his own world. I suspect that Putin looked at Trump's actions toward Canada, Mexico, China, Colombia, and Denmark and realized that Trump simply comes and squeezes money and he gets whatever he wants from those who are weaker than him. Putin realized that intimidating Trump will not work because Trump can fire back badly, only of a much higher caliber. Putin praises Trump everywhere, says how cool Trump is, how incredible, wise, great, strong, etc. Putin literally, in a second, transformed himself from the dictator and terrorist who promised to capture everyone and enslave everyone into this very, very kind man. He praises Trump's courage and determination, calls Trump his master, and promises that all other world leaders will soon be standing at Trump's feet and gently wagging their tails. By the way, he also said that Biden stole the 2020 election from Trump, and if Trump's election hadn't been stolen, then there wouldn't have been any Russian invasion of Ukraine. This is an absolutely obvious attempt to flatter Trump. In essence, dictator Putin, with all these statements, is standing in Trump's feet and is already waging his tail or something he has instead of a tail. He really wants Trump's favor. Putin wants him to side with Russia in the war with Ukraine, and in this context, as you understand, his it's all about his stories about the strikes of Washington have lost their relevance at all. At the same time, Putin still dreams of Trump being the first to call him and be the first to make contact. I think it's essential for Putin that Trump at least creates the illusion that he takes Putin seriously as his equal. This is very important for Putin. He generally has a painful history with "you respect me." He himself doesn't respect anyone. He fears and respects Trump, and he really wants Trump to respect him. Therefore, he begs Trump to call me, call me, but Trump doesn't call, and through his people and his administration sends signals to Putin. Come on, in short, make peace with Ukraine. Otherwise, it will be worse. Putin really wants to meet with Trump. That's obvious. For the Kremlin, the ideal scenario is negotiating only between the United States and Russia, and accordingly, only Trump and Putin need to meet. Ukraine has no business here. Let Putin reach an agreement with Trump, and then Ukraine will be told everything that the US and Russian leaders agree on. But the Ukrainian side warns in advance that this combination will not work. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky is saying this publicly, and I think that such signals are actively being conveyed to the American side through diplomatic channels. Well, Trump himself understands this. Lately, he has been constantly saying that negotiations with Ukraine are needed, that Zelensky is ready for negotiations. That's what he said, speaking online to the participants of the Davos Forum. And finally, the appointment of Keith Kellogg as a special representative for negotiations with Russia and Ukraine is evidence that Americans understand we need to negotiate with Russia, with Ukraine, and Russia with Ukraine. So, yes, the Americans are gradually putting pressure on the Russians. However, I'm not in a hurry to draw optimistic conclusions yet. After all, there are still issues that have not been agreed upon. For example, when there will be some kind of telephone conversation between Donald Trump and Putin, the date of their meeting. It's been worked out, of course, it's been agreed upon, but I think there are contradictions. The Russians are very insidious. They may agree, but this doesn't mean they will give up their negotiating whims. I think that they will try to influence both Trump and the American side during the negotiations in order to persuade them to the strategy of the negotiation process. It was noticeable that until the end of January, Trump was focused mainly on domestic political initiatives, on the fight against illegal migration, and other domestic political decisions. Only in recent days has he been paying more and more attention to external political decisions. In Ukraine, we see an activation and also a public negotiation track. General Keith Kellogg is already expected to visit Ukraine and Europe as well. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio will meet with foreign ministers in Paris, and I think there might be other events. By the end of the next week, the key event will be the Munich Security Conference. and many expect Americans to participate there. Keith Kellogg has already confirmed that he will be there, but the main thing is who will be among the top officials. Traditionally, the US Vice President was that person, and it seems like the Vice President of the United States, G.D. Vance, will be there as well. We understand how difficult and controversial G.D. Vance is. By the way, he was in Munich last year while still a senator. Then his speech in Munich was, to put it mildly, not entirely acceptable to us and caused critical resonances in Ukraine and not only. It will be very interesting what he will say this time, in particular about Ukraine. Moreover, this should not only be his personal position, it should be the agreed upon position of the new US administration. I think that now the Europeans should also actively respond to the topic of peace negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling on them to do so, and they should also respond to the policy of the new US administration. Moreover, there are a lot of ambiguous initiatives. There are risks of a trade war and so on. So Munich conference will be very, very indicative. But in any case, a surge in official negotiation activity is already beginning. Therefore, time is of a great importance. But Trump can also pause. That's how it is now with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Trump says, I will not rush. He's also in no hurry with Putin. There are his own status games going on there. And therefore, we would like to process to develop faster, of course. But Trump can, as they say, rush quickly, but he can also take long pauses. In this case, in this sense, he's a very specific politician and negotiator. Therefore, it is not so easy to predict. So we hope that negotiations on the future of Ukraine will be in favor of Ukrainian people and Ukrainian state. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.